My name is Ken Adam, and I was the production designer on You Only Live Twice, which we shot in '66. Here you find the New Otani Hotel, which I used for Sato's office exterior. And remember, it's a long time ago, you know, but I liked the architecture, and so I had to sell it to Louis Gilbert. There he is. That's on Kagoshima, on Kyushu, southern, and there's Peter Hunt, who was and Bill Cartledge, Louis Gilbert, all filmed at Kagoshima. Remember, we didn't find the Fleming locations we looked for, and we'd been spending 3 weeks in 2 helicopters scouting mainland Japan and southern Japan, and now we flew over the volcanoes. This was an active volcano at Kagoshima. When I found this, it looked to me like a moonscape. There are about 6 volcanoes, one after the other. And when I saw this one, I think, it triggered off the idea maybe it would be fun to have the villain live in one of the volcanoes. Here you see a rather nervous Louis on a boat going to a fishing village, Akime, and Louis was rather nervous with Bill Cartledge on the rather quite rough seas, but that's where we filmed the pearl diver sequences and also Sean getting married to a Japanese girl. Now we are in Kagoshima with the worst heat I think I've ever experienced in my life, because it was a damp heat. And you see everybody with towels and so on. In fact, you put on a shirt and 2 minutes later you were soaked through. I also remember Alan Wicker coming out to visit us. And Alan Wicker was a journalist, really, who came, you know, who was very well known in those days. He had his own sort of program, and he came to visit us while we were filming. There's that volcano, that big active volcano in the back of Kagoshima. That was all shot when we were in and outside the cave of Akime when the volcano blows up. I had to find the cave, so you know, when the volcano blows up, there's a scene of Sean and the Japanese actress swimming out at this spot. And again, it was very, very, very warm there. We were shooting it in August. There's Sean, he was a camera operator. There is Kabi and myself. Well, I was crazy always about any sort of boat, and that's me. My God, I looked a lot younger. Unbelievable, isn't it? The original Nellie was not my design. I found out about it on Radio 4 one morning. At the time it was Jack DeManio, and he introduces Wing Commander Wallace, who had built this little Nellie, which was a gyrocopter and which he was going to put on the market. I was so fascinated. I rang up the BBC and got Wallace's number and asked him if he would demonstrate this gyrocopter at Pinewood, and he came. And being an ex-pilot myself, I was absolutely fascinated by this tiny machine, and said, we've got to have it in the film. And I redesigned it then as a fighting machine. Wallace used to double for Sean, and he was an incredible pilot, and he sometimes took this machine up to 8,000 feet, if not higher, and was quite fearless. And I wouldn't recommend somebody, to do it, but he was incredible. It was one actually of the most effective sequences in that film, and has been imitated. There's one of our helicopters. That was not funny, actually, because that was on top of the volcano. We all had to hike up there, Mount Kirishima. And I remember I first found the location, and we hiked up there with a unit. Suddenly fog engulfed the whole top of the volcano, and the helicopters couldn't land, and we had to walk all the way back, and it was about 2 hours hike, which wasn't funny. This was during film. This is Mia Hamer, Sean, Lewis, and Deanne sitting next to Sean, who's clowning again. I think, if I remember rightly, the fog set in, and we only had a certain number of horses, and so I think Lewis and the cubby went on horseback, while we all had to trudge back on foot. And that's looking down at the actual volcano crater. And, but you can see the bad weather coming in. And that was, I was filming Bob Simmons, who was our chief stuntman or stunt director, and also stunting for Sean. He was a wonderful person, because nobody had the courage to go down to the actual crater lake because it was very hot too. And it was a volcano was still active. And oh, this was a helicopter, lightweight helicopter, which we used to go inside the crater on location. And it was a very dangerous operation. I was very nervous at the time because, I don't know if I filmed it, he disappeared in the actual crater for quite a considerable time, and we thought he crashed. And in fact, what had happened, there were down currents, which he didn't realize, and the helicopter was very underpowered, and it took him, I think, almost 4 or 5 minutes to get out of the crater. The Kobe docks, which, and there's a fight going on. Oh yeah, that was the Tanaka, the ship they found. Kobe, of course, was back to civilization. I have a rehearsal in front of the ship, and there's Akiko with Sean running, and then there's that big battle on top of the roof, and we shot all that at Kobe. There they are again. Louis in foreground. Press all around. I mean, by this time, yeah, I don't know, Sean isn't in the best of mood. Police press all around, and he didn't like too much press. And now we are back in Pinewood with the construction of the volcano set, which was, you know, the biggest set I think I've ever designed. And you can see the amount of tubular we used. It was, I mean, it was a completely new idea based on that crater lake. And when I look back at it, I think I must have been slightly crazy to try and attempt something like that. And I think not only I but a lot of other people thought so too. But I had Ronnie Udell, who was my chief construction coordinator, who was fabulous. I had a great art department. And great plasterers and riggers, and they all rose to the challenge. And initially we had a lot of problems because nobody knew what I was doing, and they said it's dangerous, work 120 foot up, which it was, and they wanted extra money and so on. And as the set grew, so did the enthusiasm. I always found that eventually. And we worked day and night and weekends, and the riggers and plasterers who had been difficult at the beginning brought their whole families along to see what they were doing, and it was fabulous. And I remember one night when they were working on that top 120 feet with 50 belts in awful conditions, Letizia and I drove out and went up there and gave them some bottles of, or a drink of port or brandy, I can't remember, which we have never forgotten, and I think they have never forgotten.